Radiant energy, unraveling Tesla's greatest secret. The story you are about to read is derived from a carefully researched paper presented by Dr. Peter Lindemann before a private audience in Irvine, California on September 12, 2000. The lecture was titled The Free Energy Secrets of Cold Electricity. It detailed the story of radiant energy and its successful application by Edwin Gray in an over-unity motor design which Gray debuted in 1973. The real detective work, and credit, in uncovering Tesla's discovery of radiant energy came from author Gary Vasileidos in his recent book, Secrets of Cold War Technology, without which Lindemann could not have solved the enigma of Gray's radiant circuit design. This lecture delivered the goods. The secret of Tesla's radiant energy has finally been revealed in manifold detail and only awaits the industry of those who care to study and understand it. Part 1 presents a general overview of Tesla's discovery and the political intrigues that led to its subsequent suppression. Part 2 will detail the nuts and bolts of how Tesla produced radiant energy with block diagrams, schematics, and drawings from Tesla's original patents to illustrate all of the necessary elements and parameters required. Additional details on Gray's modern adaptation of Tesla's radiant circuitry and a brief look at Eric Dollard, the only man to successfully recreate Tesla's Colorado Springs magnifying transmitter and reproduce the pure steaming white rays of radiant energy in 1986 exactly as described by Tesla in his Colorado journals. Ken Adachi. Of all the great inventions and discoveries of Nikola Tesla, nothing stood out with greater potential benefit to the whole of humanity than his discovery of radiant energy in 1889. The series of observations that led to the discovery of radiant energy initially grew out of experiments that Tesla had conducted in an attempt to duplicate the results that Heinrich Hertz had claimed to achieve in affirming the existence of electromagnetic waves, the discovery of which Hertz announced in 1887. While replicating Hertz's experiments, Tesla experimented with violently abrupt DC electrical discharges and discovered a new force in the process. Only after conducting exhaustive experimental trials for the next 3 years, did Tesla announce this stupendous discovery in a paper published in December, 1892, entitled The Dissipation of Electricity. Incredibly, most academicians of the day completely missed the mark in understanding the true significance of his paper. Noted scientists such as Sir Oliver Lodge, mistakenly thought that Tesla was referring to high-frequency AC electricity in the operation of the Tesla transformer, a huge blunder that remains to this day in the misnaming and misinterpretation of the Tesla coil. The transformer that Tesla referred to in the 1892 paper did not operate on magnetic/electric field induction created by alternating currents. It operated in an entirely new domain of physics based on abrupt discharges of electrostatic potentials and the subsequent release of kinetic radiant energy from the omnipresent ether. Tesla was now operating under entirely new rules which he referred to as dynamic electrostatic forces and had, by now, completely abandoned any further interest in the AC waveform. The genesis of the Lodge misunderstanding, however, began a few years earlier with the publication of certain mathematical formulas by a brilliant Scotsman named James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell's equations using mathematical models, James Clerk Maxwell had earlier suggested that two different types of electrical disturbances could possibly exist in nature. One type was a longitudinal electric wave which required alternating concentrations of densified and rarefied pulsations of electrostatic fields that moved along a single vector. Today, we refer to these as standing waves or scalar waves. Maxwell ultimately rejected this idea because he was convinced that this type of wave propagation was impossible to achieve, but his assumption was erroneous and would later portend formidable consequences for Tesla and the world at large. Maxwell's second wave postulation was that of a transverse electromagnetic wave that exhibited a rapid alternation of electric fields along a fixed axis that radiated away from its point of origin at the speed of light and was detectable at great distances. Maxwell had more faith in the existence of this type of wave and encouraged experimenters to look in this direction. It was the discovery of this type of wave that Hertz had laid claim to, but Tesla was meticulous and fastidious in replicating Hertz's experimental parameters and he could not obtain the results claimed by Hertz. Tesla discovered a fundamental flaw in Hertz's experiment, Hertz had failed to take into account the presence of air in his experiments. Hertz had mistakenly identified electrostatic inductions or electrified shock waves as true electromagnetic waves. Tesla was saddened to bring this news to the distinguished academician, but felt scientific honesty was paramount if progress was to be achieved. Tesla visited Hertz in Germany and personally demonstrated the experimental error to him. Hertz agreed with Tesla and had planned to withdraw his claim, but reputations, political agendas, national pride, and above all, powerful financial interests, intervened in that decision and set the stage for a major rift in the accepted theories that soon became transformed into the fundamental laws of the electric sciences that have held sway in industry and the halls of academia to the present day. Tesla's introduction to the phenomena of radiant energy began with early observations by linesmen working for Thomas Edison, Tesla's former employer. DC anomalies before Tesla's invention of the polyphase AC generator became the industry standard and overtook Thomas Edison's use of DC generators. The DC electrical system was the only system available to deliver electricity to America's homes and factories. Due to the resistance offered by long transmission lines, Edison had to produce very high DC voltages from his generators in order to deliver enough voltage and current to its final destination. He also had to provide additional pumping stations along the way to boost the sagging voltage which dwindled from line losses. A curious anomaly occurred in the very first instant of throwing the power switch at the generating station. Purple/blue colored spikes radiated in all directions along the axis of the power lines for just a moment. In addition, a stinging, ray-like shocking sensation was felt by those who stood near the transmission lines. In some cases, when very large DC voltages surged from the generators, the stinging sensation was so great that occasionally a blue spike jumped from the line and grounded itself through a workman, killing him in the process. Tesla realized almost immediately that electrons were not responsible for such a phenomena because the blue spike phenomena ceased as soon as the current started flowing in the lines. Something else was happening just before the electrons had a chance to move along the wire. At the time, no one seemed to be very interested in discovering why these dramatic elevations in static electrical potential were taking place, but rather, engineering design efforts were focused on eliminating and quenching this strange anomaly which was considered by everyone to be a nuisance except Tesla. Tesla viewed it as a powerful, yet unknown form of energy which needed to be understood and harnessed if possible. The phenomena only exhibited itself in the first moment of switch closure, before the electrons could begin moving. There seemed to be a bunching or choking effect at play, but only briefly. Once the electrons began their movement within the wire, all would return to normal. What was this strange energy that was trying to liberate itself so forcefully at the moment of switch closure? Tesla, genius out of time in the later quarter of the 19th century, Tesla was alone in his opposition to the fundamental views of the nature of electrical forces as described by three of the biggest names in electric science, James Clerk Maxwell, Hermann von Helmholtz, and Heinrich Hertz. Tesla possessed a broader vision of the cosmos because his keen sense of awareness and especially his natural intuitive insights gave him a deeper understanding of the role that the ether, or ether, played in the manifestations of all electrical phenomena while his contemporaries focused their attention exclusively on the electromagnetic component, assuming that no other component could be involved. This lack of etheric insight by his contemporaries, with the exception of Sir William Crookes, and the heated controversy that the mere mention of the ether had engendered was to cause Tesla ridicule and sarcasm from men of inferior intellect for decades. The ether controversy largely dissipated in the academic arena after the publication of Einstein's theory of relativity, 1905, and the Michelson-Morley experiment which essentially declared that the ether theory was dead, but Tesla's insights and deductions concerning the role of the ether were correct all along. The ether existed then and it exists now, despite the lockstep denials by mainstream science, past or present. Rudolf Steiner, another man of genius, affirmed that the ether was composed of four fractions which he described as 1, the light ether, 2, the warmth ether, 3, the chemical ether, and 4, the life ether, a combination of the first three. Tesla's New York and Colorado experiments confirmed for him that radiant energy was bound up within the elusive ether, but could be made manifest by the creation of an abrupt disruption in the equilibrium of the ether fractions using one-way, high-magnitude pulses of short duration. This was the key that unlocked radiant energy. See the excitement coming. These were the words that Tesla used at the end of his pivotal 1892 December lecture, The Dissipation of Electricity. He was brimming over with buoyancy and optimism for the future. In the 1890s, Tesla conducted a large number of experiments which confirmed his theory and refined his understanding of the special conditions required for radiant energy to express itself. He later expanded his New York work with the large-scale experimental trials conducted at Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899. Tesla, the humanitarian, wanted more than anything to share this enormous discovery with his fellow man. Tesla spoke of practical applications of radiant energy that were so wide-reaching that they could have created a profound and immense leap into the future for all of mankind in practically every sector of daily life. Unlimited electricity could be made available anywhere and at any time, by merely pushing a rod into the ground and turning on the electrical appliance. Homes, farms, offices, factories, villages, libraries, museums, street lights, etc., could have all their lighting needs met by merely hanging ordinary light bulbs or fluorescent tubes anywhere desired, without the need for wiring, and produce brilliant white light 24 hours a day. Motor energy for any imagined use such as industrial applications, transportation, tractors, trucks, trains, boats, automobiles, airships or planes could be powered freely anywhere on the planet from a single magnifying transmitter. This new form of energy even had the ability to elevate human consciousness to levels of vastly improved comprehension and mental clarity. Undreamed of therapeutic applications to improve human health and to eliminate disease conditions could have been achieved fully 100 years ago had Tesla been allowed to complete his commercial development of radiant energy. But powerful barons of industry, chiefly in the person of John Pierpont Morgan, colluded to deny him the financial backing he needed, and in doing so, effectively denied mankind one of nature's most abundant and inexhaustible gifts of free energy. The magnifying transmitter, the closest Tesla came to a worldwide industrial application of his radiant energy dream, was the construction of his huge magnifying transmitter at Shoreham, Long Island, a site which he named Wardencliff. Following his return to New York City from Colorado Springs in 1899, Tesla was jubilant and full of enthusiasm to implement his plan for the commercial application of radiant energy. He turned to J.P. Morgan for a substantial portion of the funding to finance the huge project at Wardencliff. Morgan was chiefly concerned with turning a profit from overseas radio transmissions, since Marconi was fast locking up the market and Morgan, ever the aggressor, wanted a share of the market. When Tesla told him that the transmitter could transmit intelligence to the world, Morgan assumed that he meant ordinary radio communications, but Tesla was not referring to ordinary radio transmissions. He was talking about something much bigger, but avoided revealing all to Morgan during this early phase of the Wardencliff project. Some considerable time later, Tesla eventually felt compelled to tell Morgan the larger possibilities offered by the magnifying transmitter when he needed more funding to complete the project. Tesla thought that Morgan would be overwhelmed by his expanded explanation of the true capacities of the transmitter and would be anxious to complete the work, but Tesla's assumption had backfired and Morgan refused to lay out any more money for the transmitter. Sadly, the enormous benefits that could have been made available to society by Tesla's magnifying transmitter project died then and there. Morgan and Westinghouse Morgan had already orchestrated circumstances in Tesla's life in order to force Tesla to be dependent on him for financial backing. During an earlier period, when Tesla himself had millions from his polyphase AC generator royalty payments and other earnings, Morgan wanted to woo Tesla with a deal that effectively gave Morgan majority control over his patent rights and projects, but Tesla turned him down, telling Morgan that he had enough money of his own to fund his projects. While returning to his hotel from that very meeting with Morgan, however, Tesla was told that his laboratory had been burned to the ground. It represented a tremendous loss to Tesla and it shook him deeply. Everyone, of course, felt convinced that Morgan was behind the arson. In order to save face, Morgan was embarrassed by Tesla into putting up the money to pay for the rebuilding of a new lab as an act of philanthropy. From that time forward, however, other financial backers were not to be found. Morgan was powerful enough to blacklist Tesla among the Eastern establishment elites that previously had hobnobbed and faded with Tesla as if he was one of their own. Blacklisting and ostracization by officialdom and financiers lifted somewhat after Morgan's death, but generally continued to haunt Tesla for the rest of his life. Before the turn of the century, Tesla also willingly gave up millions, perhaps billions, in royalty earnings to George Westinghouse in an unprecedented act of friendship. Westinghouse had believed in the superiority of Tesla's AC system and provided the money to build Tesla's big AC generators at Niagara Falls, New York. Tesla was paid millions up front for his patents, but was also due to receive royalty earnings for every kilowatt of power produced. When Westinghouse ran into financial difficulties at a later date, Tesla tore up his royalty contract in order to save Westinghouse from financial ruin. Had he not done that, Tesla would have had enough money from royalties to keep him ensconced in great wealth for the rest of his life. The story is frequently told that when Morgan found out from Tesla that the true purpose of the Wardencliff transmitter was to provide free electricity to the world, he abruptly pulled the funding. That's not completely accurate. The economic conditions were recessionary at the time and the stock market had taken a considerable dip that year. Morgan wasn't interested in risking any more capital in perilous times on a project he couldn't fully fathom and wasn't completely convinced of. Tesla held land ownership of the Wardencliff site and tower, but no further work was done after 1910. In 1914, Tesla was deeply in debt and signed over the deed of Wardencliff Station to pay off years of back rent due to the owners of the New Yorker hotel where he was living. He occupied 2 penthouse suites in the hotel. In 1917, the hotel owners had the tower demolished and its parts sold for salvage. Despite the loss of Wardencliff, Tesla continued to refine his understanding of radiant energy and miniaturize the equipment needed to produce it. He eventually was able to reduce the equipment down to the size of a suitcase. Energy from space through the Quadropole system of nature. Dr. Constantin Mail. Power engineering scalar field theory, Faraday versus Maxwell and demonstration of longitudinal wave transmission, Constantin Mail, 2003. This is Professor Drive. Ing. Constantin Mail's mind-blowing video lecture Power Engineering Scalar Field Theory, Faraday versus Maxwell and Demonstration of Longitudinal Wave Transmission, 2003, which explains how one can modify the basic equations of electromagnetic field to include longitudinal waves, which results in a true revolution in electromagnetics. This short but highly informative presentation is probably the only one in existence for English-speaking audience to correctly expand the classical electromagnetic field theory to include longitudinal/Tesla waves. The impact of such an expansion is immense and requires a complete change in thinking and a revision of the very foundations of physics in general. Do scalar waves exist or not? In Mail's extended field theory, they come about naturally, eliminating the need for any exotic theories such as superstrings, dark matter, revising even the theory of relativity. Mail explains how Faraday's experiments were actually describing a much broader electromagnetics than was later derived by Maxwell and curtailed to an even more primitive state by others, so that today's engineers are literally handicapped when using it. The missing experimental pieces eventually came from the work of Tesla, and a small version of his wireless transmission of energy is demonstrated here, carrying electrical energy without losses to the other side of the table with an impossible 1.5 times the speed of light. During this amazing lecture, Mail takes you through the forgotten ideas of Nikola Tesla and explains how they are the missing pieces which prevented scientists to reach the goal of a comprehensible unified field theory. Along the course, he also discusses many new applications which can now be not only better understood but also built and used in our everyday life. presented at the first Nikola Tesla Energy Science Conference and Exposition 2003 in Washington, D.C. before astonished audience who just couldn't believe what they were seeing. Radiant energy is the energy of electromagnetic waves. Radiant energy exists in a range of wavelengths that extends from extremely low frequency, ELF, to gamma rays. The term is most commonly used in the fields of radiometry, solar energy, heating and lighting, but is also used less frequently in other fields, such as telecommunications. The quantity of radiant energy may be calculated by integrating radiant flux, or power, with respect to time and, like all forms of energy, its SI unit is the joule. In applications involving transmission of power from one location to another, radiant energy is sometimes used to refer to the electromagnetic waves themselves, rather than their energy, a property of the waves. Radiant energy is one of the energy sources that can be used to power an open system. Such an open system can be man-made, such as a solar energy collector, or natural, such as the Earth's atmosphere. In geophysics, transparent greenhouse gases trap the sun's radiant energy, at certain wavelengths, allowing it to penetrate deep into the atmosphere or all the way to the Earth's surface, where they are re-emitted as longer wavelength radiation, chiefly infrared radiation. Radiant energy is produced in the sun as a result of nuclear fusion. Radiant energy, as well as convective and conductive energy, is used for heating homes. It can be generated electrically by infrared lamps, or can be absorbed from sunlight and used to heat water. Since radiant energy is really just electromagnetic radiation under another name, it is the basis of a wide range of communication technologies using radio frequency and microwave radiation. One of the earliest wireless telephones to be based on radiant energy was invented by Nikola Tesla. The device used transmitters and receivers whose resonances were tuned to the same frequency, allowing communication between them. In 1916, he recounted, see Anderson's book, below, an experiment he had done in 1896. He recalled that whenever I received the effects of a transmitter, one of the simplest ways to detect the wireless transmissions was to apply a magnetic field to currents generated in a conductor, and when I did so, the low frequency gave audible notes. The United States Patent Office has a classification of radiant energy for patent applications, Class 250, a residual class for methods and apparatus involving radiant energy. This class provides for all methods and apparatus for using, generating, controlling or detecting radiant energy, combinations including such methods or apparatus, subcombinations of same and accessories therefore not classifiable elsewhere by the Patent Office. Terminology. 1. Radiant energy Q joule J. 2. Radiant flux Watt W. Radiant energy per unit time, also called radiant power. 3. Radiant intensity I Watt per steradian WSR times 10 power minus 1 power per unit solid angle. 4. Radiance L Watt per steradian per square meter WSR times 10 power minus 1 m times 10 power minus 2 power per unit. Solid angle per unit projected source area. Sometimes confusingly called intensity. 5. Irradiance E Watt per square meter Wm times 10 power minus 2 power incident on a surface. Sometimes confusingly called intensity. 6. Radiant emittance / radiant exitance M Watt per square meter Wm times 10 power minus 2 power emitted from a surface. Sometimes confusingly called intensity. 7. Spectral radiance L or L Watt per steradian per metre3 or Watt per steradian per square meter per Hertz WSR times 10 power minus 1 m times 10 power minus 3 or WSR times 10 power minus 1 m times 10 power minus 1 Hz times 10 power minus 1 commonly measured in WSR times 10 power minus 1 times 10 power minus 2 nanometer times 10 power minus 1. 8. Spectral irradiance E or E Watt per meter 3 or Watt per square meter per Hertz Wm times 10 power minus 3 or Wm times 10 power minus 2 Hertz 1 commonly measured in Wm times 10 power minus 2 nanometer times 10 power minus 1. Radio spectrum. Extremely low frequencies from 3 Hz to 30 Hz, super low frequencies from 30 Hz to 300 Hz, ultra low frequencies from 300 Hz to 3 kHz, very low frequencies from 3 kHz to 30 kHz, low frequencies from 30 kHz to 300 kHz, medium frequencies from 300 kHz to 3 MHz, high frequencies from 3 MHz to 30 MHz, very high frequencies from 30 MHz to 300 MHz, ultra high frequencies from 300 MHz to 3 GHz. Super high frequencies from 3 GHz to 30 GHz, extremely high frequencies from 30 GHz to 300 GHz. Radiant energy. Term of radiometry. The energy transported by electromagnetic radiation. When this radiation hits an object in its path, then it may get absorbed partly or completely and transformed into some other form. For example, this is the case with the microwave radiation, electromagnetic ration near ca 5 GHz, when it is absorbed by the water in your food, and transformed into thermal energy, heat. The special case we are interested in is of course the energy transported by electromagnetic radiation within the spectral band visible to the human eye. We usually measure the output of a light source in radiant energy weighted by the spectral response curve of the human eye per time unit, its luminous flux. Standard unit for radiant energy is joule, J. Radiant energy, energy in the form of electromagnetic waves. Note 1, radiant energy may be calculated by integrating radiant power with respect to time. Note 2, radiant energy is usually expressed in joules. T. Henry Moray makes some final adjustments in tuning his radiant energy. Device to tap 0-point vacuum energy. The Moray Radiant Energy Device. In the early 1900s, Dr. T. Henry Moray of Salt Lake City produced his first device to tap energy from the meta-frequency oscillations of empty space itself. Eventually Moray was able to produce a free energy device weighing 60 pounds and producing 50,000 watts of electricity for several hours. Ironically, although he demonstrated his device repeatedly to scientists and engineers, Moray was unable to obtain funding to develop the device further into a usable power station that would furnish electrical power on a mass scale. As a boy, Moray had been deeply inspired by the greatest electrical genius of all time, Nikola Tesla. His imagination was especially fired by Tesla's claims to have knowledge of an energy source greater than ordinary electricity, and by Tesla's emphasis on frequencies as the stuff of the universe. When Moray finished high school in Salt Lake City, he went abroad to study, and took resident examinations for his doctorate in electrical engineering from the University of Uppsala, Sweden, during the period 1912 to 14. Returning home, his diploma and credentials were interrupted by World War I, and the university mailed him these items in 1918 after the war. Shortly thereafter, Moray produced his first elementary device that delivered measurable electrical power, and he continued to work diligently on energy devices when he had time. In the 1920s and 1930s he steadily improved his devices, particularly his detector tube, the only real secret of the device according to Moray himself. In his book, The Sea of Energy in Which the Earth Floats, Moray presents documented evidence that he invented the first transistor-type valve in 1925, far ahead of the officially recognized discovery of the transistor. In his free energy detector tube Moray apparently used, inside the tube itself, a variation of this transistor idea, a small rounded pellet of a mixture of triboluminescent zinc, a semiconductor material, and a radioactive or fissile material. His patent application, for which a patent has never been granted, was filed on July 13, 1931, long before the advent of the Bell Laboratories transistor. Here the Moray Radiant Energy device is providing free power to 35 100-watt lamps and a 1200-watt iron. In test after test Moray demonstrated his radiant energy device to electrical engineering professors, congressmen, dignitaries, and a host of other visitors to his laboratory. Once he even took the device several miles out in the country, away from all power lines, to prove that he was not simply tuning into energy being clandestinely radiated from some other part of his laboratory. Several times he allowed independent investigators to completely disassemble his device and reassemble it, then reactivate it themselves. In all tests, he was successful in demonstrating that the device could produce energy output without any appreciable energy input. According to exhaustive documentation, no one was ever able to prove that the device was fraudulent or that Moray had not accomplished exactly what he claimed. On the other hand, the records are full of signed statements from physicists, electrical engineers, and scientists who came to the Moray laboratory as doubting Thomases and left with the complete conviction that Moray had indeed succeeded in tapping a universal source of energy that could produce free electrical power. But in the face of all of this, the U.S. Patent Office refused to grant Moray a patent. First, because his device used a cold cathode in the tubes, the patent examiner asserted it was common knowledge that a heated cathode is necessary to obtain electrons, and, second, because he failed to identify the source of the energy. All sorts of irrelevant patents and devices were also presented as being infringed upon or duplicated by Moray's work. Each of these objections was patiently answered and nullified by Moray. Nonetheless, the patent has still not been issued to this day, although the Morays still keep the patent application current. One of Moray's efforts to develop the machine involved an association with the Rural Electrification Agency for a short time before World War II. At that time, the REA was apparently infiltrated by communist sympathizers and high-level officials of a decidedly pinkish tinge. These officials continually urged Moray to turn over all details of his device to the Soviet Union, and even arranged the visit of high-level Soviet scientists to the Moray laboratory to see the device in operation on the initiative of the communist-infiltrated REA. One person, let us call him Z, spent about 2 months in Moray's laboratory, and succeeded in worming his way into Moray's full confidence. Moray eventually disclosed most of the details of the construction of his special valve to Z, the only person in whom Moray ever completely confided. There is strong reason to believe that Z was a Soviet agent, and that this is where the Soviets first obtained the impetus to develop the hyperspace amplifiers later used in their psychotronic weapons. However, Moray became quite alarmed at the continued attempts of his REA contacts to get the device into the hands of the Russians. He eventually concluded that he had become involved with a governmental group filled with radicals and reactionaries. Moray became concerned that fifth column activity was actually directed against him in an attempt to steal his device. Quotes from the Salt Lake Tribune of December 2, 1941, attributed to Representative Thomas D. Winter, imply that Moray's suspicions of the REA were well-founded, since Representative Winter called for a full-scale investigation of the REA on the grounds of communist infiltration. Indeed, Moray was wounded by gunshot in his own laboratory on March 2, 1940, which seems to suggest that his fears and suspicions were based on fact. Moray severed his association with the REA in February 1941. However, his basic unit had been destroyed by a Hammarselling witness in 1939. It is not clear whether or not this was the work of Z or of someone else. According to his son, John Moray, the man who broke his unit, as well as other interested groups, wanted complete disclosure of the materials and construction, nothing more or less. John Moray, who operates the Research Institute in Salt Lake City, has been trying to continue his father's work since the basic unit was destroyed. Dr. Moray himself died in May 1974. According to John Moray, highly energetic cosmic rays from space are tapped by the machine, which is in subharmonic resonance with this high-frequency energy level, and it converts this energy level into a usable form of electricity. However, John Moray's use of the term cosmic ray is not necessarily the same as that of modern physics, but in fact is the same as the present concept of zero-point energy of vacuum. T. Henry Moray envisioned all space filled with tremendously high-frequency vibrations carrying vast and incalculable amounts of pure raw energy. He envisioned the dynamic universe as a turbulent source of great energy, just as the ocean waves carry energy throughout the earth. This was also the vision of Tesla, and after him of Clifford and Einstein, who turned the attention of general relativity to the problem of the nature of the vacuum itself. Clifford and Einstein founded a branch of physics that has come to be known as quantum geometrodynamics, the study of energetic change that occurs in little pieces, including the concept that very small lengths of space, or pure vacuum, themselves oscillate at great frequency and with great energy. In Moray's day, relativity was still a strange and unproven branch of physics, suspected and rejected by most of the physicists of the day, and quantum physics was still in the process of being worked out. There was no theory whatsoever predicting that empty space itself not only contained prodigious quantities of energy, but in fact was prodigious quantities of energy. But slowly, over the decades, the picture has changed, and the modern followers of quantum geometrodynamics assert the truth of Tesla's original vision. Today, we know that 1 cubic centimeter of pure vacuum contains enough energy to condense into 10^80 to 10^120 grams of matter. Thus the major part of Moray's thesis that vacuum itself contains unlimited energy is vindicated today. In this sense, empty space is like a gigantic, restless ocean, and Moray's free energy tapping device is no more mysterious than the water wheel. In other words, his thesis that the energy is there to be tapped is correct. It only awaits a practical method to tap it in order to solve the energy problems of mankind forever. Once tuned in, the power continues and is free for the taking. Moray thus is vindicated as a man ahead of his time, who simply built a device before any theory existed to explain its operation. Moray met with constant opposition, and his life and that of his family was anything but pleasant. Certain pressure groups constantly tried to force him into selling for almost nothing, or to disclose the secrets of his valve's construction. He was often attacked and he was sometimes shot at on the city streets. In fact, his life was threatened so often that he was forced to install bulletproof glass in his automobile. His laboratory was broken into, some of his components and papers were stolen, and his dogs were continually being killed. Moray was shot in his own laboratory, and he himself always carried a gun. Because he was harassed ceaselessly, over the years he became understandably suspicious and close-mouthed about his work. He sometimes greeted visitors at his desk with a loaded pistol lying on the desk within easy reach, and occasionally confirmed that he would not hesitate to shoot if he were attacked or threatened. One of his greatest fears was that big interests would take up his invention and simply shelve it to keep it from benefiting the public. When large companies made him offers, he always demanded written guarantees that the device would be put into production and sold to everyone, once it was developed. Moray also realized the potential of his device as a weapon. He was fully aware that the only difference between a controlled energy device and an explosion is the rate of release of the energy. According to John Moray, his father received an offer to go to Japan in 1938 because he had built a death ray which operated off the device. According to John, a representative of the Japanese government came to the laboratory and offered a position to Moray, but he refused. Allegedly, Moray had managed to rig the device so that it projected a ray of energy in a beam, and could kill mice instantly at over 50 feet. When radiated by the beam, the mice were carbonized immediately. They appeared frozen, but nothing was left except their shells, and they simply fell apart when touched. In one experiment, Moray ran his device for 157 hours without any connection to external power sources, and produced over 50 kilowatts of power during the test. He also found that an additional 50 kilowatts could be added by simply providing another tap further back in the circuit. When he shut the device off from this test, he had proven once and for all that the device was generating electrical energy from free and natural sources without batteries or external power. During this test, nothing in the machine heated up, instead, all parts of the circuit ran absolutely solid. This alone is totally unexplainable by ordinary electromagnetic theory, and it strongly implies the truth of Moray's assertion that the device simply collects the energy in each of its stages in a subharmonically resonant manner, in synchronization with the extremely high-frequency cosmic oscillations. In other words, since the parts of the machine ran cold, it is clear that the energy was being simultaneously collected at each stage rather than being processed through the individual stages in serial order, since serial processing in the conventional electrical sense would lead to resistance heating of the circuit elements. Moray's device used 29 stages of his special detector valves, which were difficult to produce, costing about $500 each. Only about 1 in 4 proved suitable for operation. He also had difficulty in obtaining sufficiently pure materials to make his special mixture for the pellet that enabled tube operation in a one-way gating fashion. Moray explained that his device was based on the discovery of a mixture that would act as a one-way gate for the high-frequency oscillations of space, so that the energy could go through the material more readily in one direction than another. Thus it was like a one-way gate valve to an ocean wave. The energy water could flow in each valve, but was prevented from flowing back out. The assemblage of multiple stages thus provided a series of collectors which contained enough energy to be useful. Theoretically there was no limit to the number of collectors that could be added, and so there appeared to be no limit to the energy that such a device could produce. Scalar potential interferometer. Figure 6. Multimode Tesla weapon. In the 1930s Tesla announced other bizarre and terrible weapons: a death ray, a weapon to destroy hundreds or even thousands of aircraft at hundreds of miles range, and his ultimate weapon to end all war, the Tesla shield, which nothing could penetrate. However, by this time no one any longer paid any real attention to the forgotten great genius. Tesla died in 1943 without ever revealing the secret of these great weapons and inventions. Unfortunately, today in 1981, the Soviet Union has long since discovered and weaponized the Tesla scalar wave effects. Here we only have time to detail the most powerful of these frightening Tesla weapons, which Brezhnev undoubtedly was referring to in 1975 when the Soviet side at the SALT talks suddenly suggested limiting the development of new weapons more frightening than the mind of man had imagined. One of these weapons is the Tesla howitzer, recently completed at the Saryzhagan missile range and presently considered to be either a high-energy laser or a particle beam weapon. See Aviation Week and Space Technology, July 28, 1980, p. 48 for an artist's conception. Aviation Week and Space Technology, July 28, 1980. Figure 7. Tesla weapons at Saryzhagan. The Saryzhagan howitzer actually is a huge Tesla scalar interferometer with 4 modes of operation. One continuous mode is the Tesla shield, which places a thin, impenetrable hemispherical shell of energy over a large defended area. The three-dimensional shell is created by interfering 2 Fourier expansion, three-dimensional scalar hemispherical patterns in space so they pair couple into a dome-like shell of intense, ordinary electromagnetic energy. The air molecules and atoms in the shell are totally ionized and thus highly excited, giving off intense, glowing light. Anything physical which hits the shell receives an enormous discharge of electrical energy and is instantly vaporized. It goes PFFT. Like a bug hitting one of the electrical bug killers now so much in vogue. If several of these hemispherical shells are concentrically stacked, even the gamma radiation and electromagnetic pulse from a high-altitude nuclear explosion above the stack cannot penetrate all the shells due to repetitive absorption and re-radiation, and scattering in the layered plasmas. In the continuous shield mode, the Tesla interferometer is fed by a bank of Moray free energy generators, so that enormous energy is available in the shield. A diagram of the Saryzhagan-type Tesla howitzer is shown in Figure 7. Hal Crawford's fine drawing of the interferometer end of the Tesla howitzer is shown in Figure 6. Hal's exceptional rendition of the Tesla shield produced by the howitzer is shown in Figure 8. Figure 8. The Tesla shield. Figure 9. Tesla terminal area defense system. In the pulse mode, a single intense three-dimensional scalar phi-field pulse form is fired, using 2 truncated Fourier transforms, each involving several frequencies, to provide the proper three-dimensional shape. Figure 10. This is why 2 scalar antennas separated by a baseline are required. After a time delay calculated for the particular target, a second and faster pulse form of the same shape is fired from the interferometer antennas. The second pulse overtakes the first, catching it over the target zone and pair coupling with it to instantly form a violent EMP of ordinary vector, Hertzian, electromagnetic energy. There is thus no vector transmission loss between the howitzer and the burst. Further, the coupling time is extremely short, and the energy will appear sharply in an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, strikingly similar to the two-pulsed EMP of a nuclear weapon. This type weapon is what actually caused the mysterious flashes off the southwest coast of Africa, picked up in 1979 and 1980 by Vela satellites. The second flash, for example, was in the infrared only, with no visible spectrum. Nuclear flashes do not do that, and neither does super lightning, meteorite strikes, meteors, etc. In addition, one of the scientists at the Arecibo Ionospheric Observatory observed a gravitational wave disturbance, signature of the truncated Fourier pattern and the time-squeezing effect of the Tesla potential wave, traveling toward the vicinity of the explosion. Tesla howitzer. Scalar interferometer. Figure 10. Nuclear flashes off the coast of Africa. Lithuania, September 10, 1976. British European Airways flight number 831 between Moscow and London. CIA report released under FOIA. Figure 11. Continuous Tesla fireball. The pulse mode may be fed from either Moray generators or, if the Moray generators have suffered their anomalous all-fail malfunction, ordinary explosive generators. Thus the Tesla howitzer can always function in the pulse mode, but it will be limited in power if the Moray generators fail. In the continuous mode, two continuous scalar waves are emitted, one faster than the other, and they pair couple into vector energy at the region where they approach an in-phase condition. In this mode, the energy in the distant ball or geometric region would appear continuously and be sustained, and this is Tesla's secret of wireless transmission of energy at a distance without any losses. It is also the secret of a continuous fireball weapon capable of destroying hundreds of aircraft or missiles at a distance. An example of a Soviet test of this mode of operation is shown in Figure 11. Witness to a super weapon? Nick Downey describes the strange lurid glow that flared silently over the Hindu Kush. The Sunday Times, August 17, 1980. Multiple incidents in September, 1979. Tehran, Iran. June 17, 1966. Seen from near Merabat Airport. Observed 4 to 5 minutes. Seen by 2 aircraft. CIA report released under FOIA. Figure 12. Tesla electromagnetic pulse globe. The volume of the Tesla fireball can be vastly expanded to yield a globe which will not vaporize physical vehicles but will deliver an electromagnetic pulse to them to dud their electronics. A test of this mode is shown in Figure 12. See also Gwyn Roberts, Witness to a Super Weapon. The London Sunday Times, August 17, 1980. For several other tests of this mode at Sarishagan, seen from Afghanistan by British TV cameraman and former war correspondent Nick Downey. If the Moray generators fail anomalously, then a continuous mode limited in power and range could conceivably be sustained by powering the interferometer from more conventional power sources such as advanced magneto-hydrodynamic generators. Figure 13. Tesla ABM defenses. Figure 14. Moray/Tesla technology, Star Wars now. Typical strategic ABM uses of Tesla weapons are shown in Figure 13. In addition, of course, smaller Tesla howitzer systems for anti-tactical ballistic missile defense of tactical troops and installations could be constituted of more conventional field missile systems using paired or triplet radars, of conventional external appearance, in a scalar interferometer mode. With Moray generators as power sources and multiply deployed re-entry vehicles with scalar antennas and transmitters, ICBM re-entry systems now can become long-range blasters of the target areas, from thousands of kilometers distance. Figure 14. Literally, Star Wars is liberated by the Tesla technology. And in air attack, jammers and ECM aircraft now become Tesla blasters. With the Tesla technology, emitters become primary fighting components of stunning power. The potential peaceful implications of Tesla waves are also enormous. By utilizing the time squeeze effect, one can get anti-gravity, materialization and dematerialization, transmutation, and mind-boggling medical benefits. One can also get subliminal and superluminal communication, see through the earth and through the ocean, etc. The new view of phi field also provides a unified field theory, higher orders of reality, and a new super-relativity, but detailing these possibilities must wait for another book. With two cerebral brain halves, the human being also has a Tesla scalar interferometer between his ears. And since the brain and nervous system processes avalanche discharges, it can produce, and detect, scalar Tesla waves to at least a limited degree. Thus a human can sometimes produce anomalous spatio-temporal effects at a distance and through time. This provides an exact mechanism for psychokinesis, levitation, psychic healing, telepathy, precognition, postcognition, remote viewing, etc. It also provides a reason why an individual can detect a stick on a radionics or hieronymus machine, which processes scalar waves, when ordinary detectors detect nothing. Unfortunately, there is not room to develop the implications of this human Tesla interferometry in detail, for that must wait for yet another book, presently in its initial stages, that Hal Crawford and I are writing. Table 5. Orders of reality. Photons are pair-coupled scalars. Velocity limited to the speed of light. Carriers of T-photon interaction is ubiquitous. Yields first-order reality. Scalar O waves not velocity limited, yields higher-order realities. Figure 15. Implications of Tesla potential. At the July 1981 U.S. Psychotronics Association's annual conference in Dayton, Ohio, I presented the first rough paper on the Tesla secret and scalar interferometry. A videotape of the presentation was made and will shortly be available. I am also scheduled to make a special presentation at the Alternate Energy Conference in Toronto, Canada in latter October, 1981. A professional, videotaped 2-hour presentation on this subject is also being prepared. Wide distribution of the material through the International Underground Physics and Technology Network has already been made. This time, God willing, Tesla's secret will not be suppressed for another 80 years. And perhaps it is not yet too late. The material has cost me, now, some 16 years of agonizing labor and nearly $100,000 of my own personal funds. No orthodox university, scientific group, foundation, or governmental agency would support such an effort, either financially or otherwise. Indeed, most ordinary journals will not even accept material on such matters. Nonetheless, the area is of overwhelming importance, and I truly believe Tesla's lost secret will shortly affect the lives of every human being on Earth. Perhaps with the free and open release of Tesla's secret, the scientific and governmental bureaucracies will be shocked awake from their slumber, and we can develop defenses before Armageddon occurs. Perhaps there is hope after all, for even Brezhnev, in his strange July 1975 proposal to the SALT talks, seemed to reveal a perception that a turning point in war and weaponry may have been reached, and that human imagination is incapable of dealing with the ability to totally engineer reality itself. Having tested the weapons, the Soviets must be aware that the ill-provoked oscillation of time flow affects the minds and thoughts, and the very life streams and even the collective species unconsciousnesses, of all life forms on Earth. They must know that these weapons are two-edged swords, and that the backlash from their use can be far more terrible to the user than was the original effect to his victim. If we can avoid the apocalypse, the fantastic secret of Nikola Tesla can be employed to cure and elevate man, not kill him. Tesla's discovery can eventually remove every conceivable external human limitation. If we humans ourselves can elevate our consciousness to properly utilize the Tesla electromagnetics, then Nikola Tesla, who gave us the electrical 20th century in the first place, may yet give us a fantastic new future more shining and glorious than all the great scientists and sages have imagined.